"Excuse me, mister. Do you want to have dinner with us?" The small voice cut through Austin Sterling's spiral of self-destruction like a knife. He looked up from his phone, where 7 missed calls from his estranged daughter glared back at him, to find an 8-year-old girl with pigtails staring at him with innocent curiosity. Austin's first instinct was to recoil. He'd come to Romano's on Thanksgiving Eve to drink expensive wine and avoid human contact, not to be ambushed by some kid who didn't understand that successful men ate alone. "No," he said curtly, turning back to his phone. "I'm fine by myself." But the little girl didn't move. "Are you sure? Grandma Avery says Thanksgiving dinner is better when you share it with people who look sad, and you look really, really sad." Austin's jaw tightened. Who was this child to psychoanalyze him? He was Austin Sterling, CEO of Sterling Industries, worth more money than this kid would see in 10 lifetimes. He didn't need pity from some random family at a restaurant. "Listen, kid," Austin snapped, his voice carrying the same ice that had frozen out investors and employees for 3 years. "I don't know you. I don't want to know you, and I certainly don't need your charity. Go back to your grandmother and leave me alone." The words hit their mark. The little girl's face crumpled slightly, but she didn't cry. Instead, she tilted her head and studied him with those impossibly wise 8-year-old eyes. "My name is Sophie," she said quietly, "and I think you're the loneliest person I've ever seen." That simple observation from a child he'd just been cruel to would shatter everything Austin thought he knew about strength, success, and what it truly meant to be alive. Because sometimes the most powerful truths come from the smallest voices, and sometimes those voices refuse to be silenced, even by the coldest hearts. If you're enjoying this story of second chances and unexpected connections, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. Because sometimes the most powerful moments in our lives come from the smallest, most unexpected voices. The little girl's name was Sophie Chen, and she possessed the kind of fearless curiosity that only 8-year-olds could master. Her grandmother Avery immediately reached for Sophie's hand, her weathered face flushing with embarrassment as she tried to pull the child back to their table. "Sophie, honey, you can't just interrupt people's dinner," Avery whispered, but her voice carried the gentle firmness of someone who'd been raising children for decades. "I'm so sorry, sir. She's very social, sometimes too much for her own good." But Austin found himself staring at this child who had no idea she'd just approached one of the most powerful men in the city. When was the last time someone had looked at him and seen just a person? Not a CEO, not a business opportunity, not a ghost haunting his own life, but simply a man sitting alone who might want company. It's okay," Austin stammered, his voice rusty from disuse in casual conversation. How long had it been since he'd spoken to a child? Years, probably. Maybe since Kayla was Sophie's age, back when his daughter still thought he hung the moon and stars. Sophie beamed at his response, completely oblivious to his discomfort. "We're having Thanksgiving dinner, and Grandma Avery said Thanksgiving is about sharing with people who might be lonely." "Are you lonely, mister?" The question hit Austin like a physical blow, out of the mouths of babes. This child seen through his expensive suit, his power lunch facade, his carefully constructed walls, and identified the one truth he'd been running from for 3 years. Yes, he was lonely, desperately, achingly lonely. "Sophie," Avery gently scolded, but Austin could see something in the older woman's eyes. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. She'd spotted his loneliness too, but she was too polite to say it outright. "Would you like to join us?" Austin heard himself asking, the words surprising him as much as they surprised Avery. "I mean, if you don't mind the company of a stranger." Sophie clapped her hands together in delight, already tugging her grandmother toward Austin's table. "See, Grandma? I told you he looked nice. He has kind eyes, just like Daddy used to have." Used to have. The past tense sent a chill through Austin, and he caught the brief shadow that crossed Avery's face. There was a story there, and it wasn't a happy one. As they settled at his table, Sophie immediately launched into animated chatter about her school's Thanksgiving play, her best friend Emma's new puppy, and her elaborate plans for Santa's visit. Austin found himself genuinely smiling for the first time in months, watching this little girl's enthusiasm light up everything around her. "I'm playing an angel in our Thanksgiving play tomorrow," Sophie announced proudly. "Grandma Avery made my costume from old sheets, and it has real glitter and everything." The mention of Thanksgiving plays triggered a memory so sharp it nearly took Austin's breath away. Kayla, at 7 years old, dressed as a shepherd in her school's nativity play, searching the audience desperately for her father's face. He'd been there that night, front row center, cheering louder than any other parent. Back when being Kayla's dad was more important than being anyone's CEO. "That sounds wonderful," Austin managed, his voice slightly hoarse. "I bet you'll be the most beautiful angel they've ever seen." "That's what Grandma says too," Sophie giggled, then turned to Avery with pure adoration. "Grandma Avery is the best grandmother in the whole world. She takes care of me and makes the best pancakes and reads me stories every night, even when she's really tired from work." Avery's smile was warm, but tired, the kind of exhaustion that came from carrying weight that was meant for younger shoulders. "Sophie is my sunshine," she said softly. "She keeps me going when things get difficult." Austin studied Avery more closely now, noting the careful way she'd ordered the least expensive items on the menu, the worn quality of her coat despite its obvious care, the way her hands showed the evidence of hard work. There was something familiar about her face, though he couldn't place it. "Do you have any kids, mister?" Sophie asked, tilting her head with innocent curiosity. "Austin," he supplied automatically. "Austin Sterling. And yes, I have a daughter. She's 22 now." "Oh, she's all grown up. Does she live with you? Is she coming for Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow?" Each question was a small knife twist. Austin felt his chest tighten as he thought about Kayla, probably celebrating Thanksgiving with her boyfriend's family, anywhere but with the father who'd chosen a board meeting over her mother's memorial service. "No, we don't really talk much anymore," Austin admitted, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. Sophie's face scrunched up in confusion. "But why not? Family is supposed to stay together, especially at Thanksgiving. That's what Grandma Avery says." "Sometimes adults make mistakes, sweetheart," Avery said gently, shooting Austin a look of understanding that made his throat close up. "Sometimes we hurt the people we love without meaning to, and it takes time to fix those hurts." "But you can always say sorry," Sophie insisted with the simple wisdom of childhood. "Sorry, fix everything, right?" If only it were that simple. Austin thought about the dozens of voicemails he'd left Kayla over the years, the birthday cards returned unopened, the Thanksgiving gifts that sat in his office because he had no address to send them to. Some sorries came too late, carried too much weight, required more than words could possibly express. "Tell me about your Thanksgiving traditions, Sophie," Austin said, desperate to change the subject before the guilt crushed him completely. Sophie's face lit up again, and she launched into an elaborate description of her and Avery's Thanksgiving Eve rituals. How they always had hot chocolate with extra marshmallows while watching old Thanksgiving movies. How they made paper snowflakes to decorate their tiny apartment because they couldn't afford a real tree. How they left cookies for Santa even though Sophie was starting to suspect the truth, because the magic was more important than the reality. As Sophie talked, Austin found himself remembering his own Thanksgiving traditions with Kayla and Sarah. The way Sarah would make hot chocolate from scratch, not the instant kind. How they drive around the neighborhood looking at Thanksgiving lights, Kayla pressed against the car window in wonder. The Thanksgiving morning when Kayla was 5 and she'd insisted on opening presents one by one so the magic would last longer. When had he stopped remembering the good times? When did grief become easier than joy? "We used to have a big house with lots of Thanksgiving decorations," Sophie continued, her voice growing softer. "Mommy and Daddy loved Thanksgiving. But now it's just me and Grandma Avery. And that's okay too, because love doesn't need a big house, right, Grandma? Avery's eyes glistened as she nodded. That's right, baby. Love just needs a willing heart. Austin felt something crack open in his chest. This child had lost her parents, her home, probably everything she'd known, and yet she still believed in love, in Thanksgiving magic, in the goodness of strangers. Meanwhile, he'd lost his wife and chose to lose his daughter too, hiding behind work and money and success, because feeling nothing seemed safer than feeling everything. Sophie, how did you know I was lonely tonight? Austin asked quietly. Sophie considered this seriously, her small face scrunched in concentration. You had the same look my grandma had when we first came to live with her. Like you were carrying something really heavy and didn't know how to put it down. But Grandma got better when she had me to take care of. Maybe you just need someone to take care of too. The simplicity of it nearly undid him. Austin had spent 3 years building walls, creating distance, convincing himself that isolation was strength. But this 8-year-old had seen through it all in a matter of minutes. Your granddaughter is very wise, Austin told Avery, his voice rough with emotion. She gets that from her mother, Avery replied, and Austin caught the tremor in her voice. Sarah always said that children see the world the way it should be, not the way it is. Sarah. Austin's heart stopped. His wife's name, spoken by the stranger, sent shockwaves through his system. Sarah was your daughter? He whispered. Avery nodded, tears threatening to spill over. Sophie's mother. She and her husband died in a car accident 2 years ago. Sophie came to live with me, and we've been figuring it out together ever since. The coincidence felt like more than coincidence. Like fate, maybe, or his Sarah's way of sending him a message from wherever she was now. Here was another Sarah's mother, another person who'd lost everything and chosen love over bitterness. I lost my Sarah too, Austin said softly. 3 years ago, cancer. The recognition passed between them, the understanding that only comes from shared grief. But while Austin had let his loss turn him into a ghost, Avery had let hers turn her into a guardian angel for a little girl who needed her. I'm sorry for your loss, Avery said, and Austin could tell she meant it in a way that only another grieving parent could. Grandma works really hard to take care of me, Sophie chimed in, completely unaware of the heavy moment passing between the adults. She has 3 jobs. She cleans offices at night, and she works at the grocery store, and she helps other old people with their medicine. She's super busy, but she always has time for my bedtime stories. 3 jobs. Austin felt sick thinking about this dignified woman working herself to exhaustion while he sat in his empty mansion counting money he didn't need. And there was still something familiar about her face, something nagging at the edge of his memory. Have we met before? He asked Avery. You seem familiar somehow. Avery's smile became strained, and she looked down at her hands. I used to work for one of the Sterling Industries, actually, in the accounting department, about 5 years ago. The bottom dropped out of Austin's stomach. 5 years ago. The massive layoffs. The cost-cutting measures that had eliminated hundreds of jobs to boost quarterly profits. He'd signed those termination papers without looking at the names, just numbers on a spreadsheet that needed to be reduced. I laid you off, he said, the words coming out like a confession. You don't remember, Avery said gently. There were a lot of us that day. I don't blame you, Mr. Sterling. You were doing what you thought was best for the company. But Austin did blame himself. Sitting here, looking at this woman who'd lost her job, then lost her daughter, and was now raising her granddaughter on 3 minimum wage jobs while he'd been wallowing in his own grief and self-pity, he blamed himself for everything. I'm so sorry, he whispered, and the apology encompassed more than just her job. It was for her loss, for his choices, for the way the world seemed to punish the good people while rewarding the selfish ones. The great thing was that after 3 months of being jobless, I got another job in your second company, Avery said. Water under the bridge, Austin said simply. Life has a way of working out the way it's supposed to. Are you sad too, Mr. Austin? Sophie asked, studying his face with the intensity only children possessed. You look like you might cry. Austin realized he might. For the first time in 3 years, the grief wasn't just a dull ache in his chest. It was sharp and immediate and demanding to be felt. But looking at Sophie's concerned face, at Avery's gentle understanding, he didn't feel alone with it anymore. Sometimes I am sad, Sophie, he admitted. I miss my wife very much, and I miss my daughter. Do you think they miss you too? The question hung in the air like a prayer. Did Kayla miss him? Or had he finally succeeded in killing her love completely? Did Sarah, wherever she was, miss the man he used to be before grief turned him into someone she wouldn't recognize? I hope so, Austin said quietly. I really hope so. Austin's hands shook as he dialed Kayla's number for the 3rd time that morning. The phone rang once, twice, then clicked straight to voicemail. But this time, instead of her usual greeting, there was a new message that felt like a dagger to his heart. Dad, I'm done trying. You made your choice 3 years ago when you picked a board meeting over Mom's memorial. I can't keep hoping you'll change. Please don't call anymore. The phone slipped from Austin's fingers, clattering onto his desk as the weight of those words settled into his soul. Done trying. His daughter had given up on him completely, and he couldn't even blame her. How many times had he chosen work over family? How many times had he proven that Sterling Industries mattered more than the people who loved him? A few hours later, after he met Avery and Sophie, something struck. His assistant knocked on the door with news that made his blood run cold. The investor crisis had exploded overnight. 3 more major stakeholders had pulled out, and the board was demanding immediate action. Emergency layoffs, massive cost cuts, the very measures that had destroyed families like Avery's 5 years ago. Austin stared at the termination list his CFO had prepared, his eyes scanning hundreds of names that represented hundreds of families who would have no Thanksgiving this year because of his failures. And there, halfway down the page, he saw a name that made his stomach drop. Avery Chen. Part-time custodial services. Avery, who was already working 3 jobs to support Sophie. Avery, who had lost her daughter and was raising her granddaughter on minimum wage. Avery, who had shown him more kindness in one evening than he'd received in 3 years of isolation. And now he was about to take away the little stability she had left. The irony was crushing. He'd spent the night with Sophie and Avery, feeling human again for the first time in years, and now he was going to destroy their lives to save a company that might not be worth saving. What would you choose? Saving your business, or protecting the people who showed you what family really means? Let me know in the comments, because Austin was about to face the hardest decision of his life. As Austin sat in his office, paralyzed by the choice between financial survival and human decency, his assistant's voice came through the intercom. Mr. Sterling, there's a little girl here to see you. She says her name is Sophie and that you're friends. Sophie had followed Avery to work that day, hoping to see Austin. Sophie. Austin's heart lurched as he remembered her promise to perform in the Thanksgiving play today. She should be at school, preparing for her moment as an angel, not standing in the sterile lobby of Sterling Industries. Send her in, Austin said, quickly shoving the termination paperwork into his desk drawer. Sophie bounced into his office, wearing her school uniform and carrying a piece of construction paper folded in half. Her face was bright with excitement, completely unaware that the man she'd called her friend was about to make her and her grandmother homeless. Mr. Austin, I came to give you this before my play. Sophie held out the construction paper with both hands, as if it were made of precious gold. I made it in art class yesterday. Austin opened the handmade Thanksgiving card with trembling fingers. Inside, drawn in crayon and marker, was a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands under a Thanksgiving tree. One tall figure in a business suit, one smaller figure with gray hair, and one tiny figure with pigtails. At the bottom, in Sophie's careful first-grade handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for being my friend. Love, Sophie." The card broke something fundamental inside Austin's chest. This child had drawn him into her family after knowing him for one evening. She'd given him a place at her table, in her heart, in her simple crayon drawing of what family could look like. And he was about to betray that trust in the most devastating way possible. "Do you like it?" Sophie asked, bouncing on her toes with anticipation. "It's beautiful, Sophie," Austin whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone's ever given me. Grandma Avery says that when you care about someone, you should tell them so they know. So I wanted to tell you that I care about you, Mr. Austin, and I think you're nice, even when you're sad." Austin knelt down to Sophie's level, looking into her innocent eyes that saw only goodness in a world that had taken her parents, her home, her security. "Sophie, I care about you too, more than you know. Will you come to my play? I'll look for you in the audience, and if you're there, I'll be the best angel ever." The promise shattered what was left of Austin's composure. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," he lied, knowing that by the time her play started, he would have signed the papers that would destroy her grandmother's livelihood. After Sophie left, practically skipping with joy, Austin sat alone in his office with her card in his hands and the termination list burning a hole in his desk drawer. This was it, the moment of truth. He could save Sterling Industries by destroying the lives of people like Avery and Sophie, or he could choose differently and watch everything he'd built crumble to dust. But as he reached for the paperwork, one thought echoed through his mind with devastating clarity. He was about to become the same man who had chosen business over family 3 years ago. The same man who had lost his daughter's love because he couldn't see past profit margins and board meetings. The same ghost who had forgotten what really mattered until an 8-year-old girl reminded him what it felt like to be human. If you're invested in Austin's journey and want to see if he chooses money or love, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because what happens next will either redeem him or destroy him completely. Hours later, as Thanksgiving Eve descended on the city like a heavy blanket, Austin made a decision that would haunt him forever. He signed the termination papers, every single one, including Avery's. But as the ink dried on those signatures, Austin felt something die inside him that he knew could never be resurrected. He'd chosen Sterling Industries over Sophie's trust, over Avery's kindness, over every lesson about love and family that they'd tried to teach him. He'd become the villain in the very story where they'd tried to make him the hero. Unable to bear the weight of his own cowardice, Austin left the office and drove aimlessly through the city, past houses glowing with Thanksgiving lights, past families walking together through the snow, past everything he'd given up in pursuit of a success that now tasted like ash in his mouth. It was nearly midnight when he found himself pulling into the parking lot of the downtown homeless shelter, though he couldn't say what had drawn him there. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was some desperate hope that he could find a way to undo what he'd done. Or maybe it was simply that he belonged among the broken and forgotten, because that's exactly what he'd become. Austin walked through the shelter's doors and immediately felt his world collapse around him. There, in the corner of the crowded common room, sat Avery and Sophie on a thin mattress, surrounded by 2 small suitcases and a garbage bag of belongings. They'd been evicted. The termination notice had reached Avery that afternoon, and without the income from her custodial job, she couldn't make rent. They'd lost their apartment on Thanksgiving Eve, and now they were spending the night in a homeless shelter because Austin Sterling had chosen profit over people once again. Sophie looked up as Austin approached, and instead of anger or accusation, her face lit up with pure joy. "Mr. Austin, you came to visit us? Grandma, look, it's our friend." Avery's expression was more guarded, the pain of betrayal evident in her tired eyes, but she managed a weak smile for Sophie's sake. "Hello, Austin. I wasn't expecting to see you here." "I'm so sorry," Austin whispered, the words completely inadequate for the magnitude of his failure. "Avery, I'm so incredibly sorry." "Sorry for what?" Sophie asked, confusion creasing her small features. "Why do you look so sad, Mr. Austin? It's Thanksgiving Eve. Are you excited for Santa? Austin couldn't speak. How could he explain to this trusting child that he was the reason she was sleeping on a shelter cot instead of in her own bed? How could he tell her that her friend, the man she'd drawn into her crayon family, had been the one to steal her home? But Sophie, oblivious to the adult complexities surrounding her, reached into her small backpack and pulled out something wrapped in tissue paper. I almost forgot. I made this for you at school. It's your Thanksgiving present. With shaking hands, Austin unwrapped the tissue paper to reveal a small angel made from construction paper, cotton balls, and gold glitter. It was clearly crafted by 8-year-old hands, imperfect and beautiful, and infused with the kind of love that money could never buy. I made this for you because you looked like you needed an angel, Sophie said solemnly. Angels are supposed to watch over people and keep them safe and help them remember they're not alone. Do you like it? Austin stared at the paper angel through tears he couldn't control anymore. This child, who had lost everything because of his choices, had made him a gift. She'd spent her time and energy creating something to comfort him while she sat homeless in a shelter on Thanksgiving Eve. Sophie, Austin choked out, it's perfect. It's the most perfect gift I've ever received. The dam burst then. 3 years of suppressed grief, guilt, and self-hatred came pouring out of Austin in wrenching sobs that echoed through the shelter's common room. He cried for Sarah, who had died believing her husband was a good man. He cried for Kayla, who had given up on the father who had failed her so completely. He cried for Avery and Sophie, who had shown him what love looked like and received betrayal in return. But most of all, he cried for the man he used to be, the father and husband who had existed before. Grief turned him into a monster who could destroy innocence without hesitation. Avery, despite having every reason to hate him, knelt beside Austin and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Austin, what's wrong? What happened? I did this, Austin sobbed, his voice broken and raw. I signed the papers. I took your job. I made you homeless. I'm the reason Sophie is sleeping in a shelter on Thanksgiving Eve. The admission hung in the air like a prayer for forgiveness that Austin knew he didn't deserve. But instead of anger, instead of the rage and condemnation he expected, Avery's voice was soft with understanding. I know, she said simply. I figured it out when I got the termination notice. But Austin, look at me. Austin raised his tear-stained face to meet her eyes, expecting to see hatred but finding only compassion. It's not too late to choose differently, Avery said, her words carrying the weight of absolution. It's never too late to become the man you're meant to be. Those words ignited something in Austin's chest, a spark of hope in the darkness of his despair. It wasn't too late. He still had a choice. He could continue being the ghost who haunted his own life, or he could become the man that Sophie saw when she looked at him. The man who deserved to be drawn into her crayon family. Austin wiped his eyes and looked at Sophie, who was watching him with concern but not fear. Even now, even after everything, she still trusted him, still believed in him, still saw the good that everyone else, including himself, had given up on. Sophie, Austin said, his voice steady for the first time in hours. How would you and Grandma Avery like to come home with me tonight? I have a big house with lots of empty rooms, and no one should spend Thanksgiving Eve in a shelter. Really? Sophie's eyes went wide with excitement. We could have a sleepover on Thanksgiving Eve? More than a sleepover, Austin said, a plan forming in his mind with crystalline clarity. How would you like Grandma Avery to have a new job? A really good job where she only has to work one place and can take care of you the way you deserve. Avery stared at him in shock. Austin, what are you saying? I'm saying I want you to be my vice president of human resources. I'm saying I want to set up a college fund for Sophie. I'm saying I want to use my money for something that actually matters for once in my miserable life. But even as he spoke, Austin knew that wasn't enough. Money and jobs were just band-aids on a wound that required surgery. He needed to save Sterling Industries without destroying the families who depended on it. He needed to prove that businesses could thrive while treating people with dignity and respect. Austin pulled out his phone and began making calls. First to his personal financial advisor, authorizing the transfer of millions from his private accounts to save the company without layoffs. Then to his CFO, canceling every termination and implementing profit-sharing programs instead of cost-cutting measures. Then to the board, offering his own salary and bonuses to stabilize the company while they found ethical investors who cared about more than quarterly profits. By dawn on Thanksgiving morning, Austin had restructured Sterling Industries from a profit-driven corporation into a company that values its employees as much as its earnings. He'd used his personal fortune to save jobs, provide health care, and create opportunities for advancement. He'd chosen people over profit, love over money, and humanity over the bottom line. But the most important call he made was to Kayla, with Sophie sitting beside him in his living room, carefully arranging her paper angel on the mantelpiece next to a photo of Sarah. "Dad?" Kayla's voice was cautious when she answered, probably shocked to see his number after her message telling him never to call again. "Kayla, it's me," Austin said, his voice trembling with hope and terror. "I know you said you were done trying, and I understand why, but I need you to know that I'm not the same man who missed your mother's memorial. I'm trying to become someone better. Someone you might be proud of." There was silence on the other end of the line, and Austin was afraid she'd hung up. But then Kayla's voice came through, smaller and more vulnerable than he'd heard it in years. "Dad, is that really you? You sound different." Sophie, who had been listening intently, leaned toward the phone and whispered loudly, "He's learning how to have a family again." "Who was that?" Kayla asked, and Austin could hear the surprise in her voice. "That's Sophie," Austin said, smiling at the little girl who had saved his soul. "She's 8 years old, and she's been teaching me some very important lessons about what family really means. Would you like to meet her?" The conversation that followed was halting and careful, full of 3 years' worth of hurt and hope. But when Austin asked if Kayla would consider flying home for Thanksgiving dinner, there was only a brief pause before she said yes. That evening, Austin's dining room was filled with voices and laughter for the first time since Sarah's death. Kayla had arrived on a last-minute flight, her walls slowly crumbling as she watched her father interact with Sophie and Avery. Sophie regaled them all with stories about her Thanksgiving angel performance, her face glowing with happiness as she basked in the attention of her new extended family. As they sat around the table, sharing stories and passing dishes, Austin felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 years: peace. Not the absence of pain, but the presence of love strong enough to carry the pain and transform it into something beautiful. "Mr. Austin," Sophie said as they finished dessert, "remember when I asked if you wanted to have dinner with us?" "I remember," Austin replied, his heart full to bursting. Sophie grinned, her face sticky with chocolate cake and her eyes bright with satisfaction. "See, I told you dinner was better with friends." Austin looked around the table at Kayla, who was tentatively smiling as she helped Avery clear plates. At Avery, who had forgiven the unforgivable and chosen grace over grudges. At Sophie, who had seen past his broken exterior to the man he could become. "You were right, Sophie," Austin said, his voice thick with gratitude. "Dinner is always better with friends and family." As the evening wound down and they prepared for bed, Austin realized that he'd found something more valuable than any business success, more precious than any corporate achievement. He'd found his way back to love, to connection, to the man Sarah had married and Kayla had once adored. It had taken losing everything to realize that he'd already had everything that mattered. But sometimes if you're very lucky, and if an 8-year-old angel believes in you enough to draw you into her crayon family, you get a second chance to choose love over fear, people over profit, and forgiveness over pride. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's enough to save not just your soul, but your family too. If this story touched your heart and reminded you what really matters in life, Please hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to remember that it's never too late to choose love. Because sometimes the most powerful transformations come from the smallest, most unexpected voices, and everyone deserves a second chance to become the person they're meant to be.